Hey there, welcome to Curtis Stage Video Tutorials. This tutorial is part 2 of bringing Photoshop layout design into Dreamweaver in the Creative Cloud. So let's get started in Dreamweaver. I have my file ready to go. It's an index file. Just so you know, we want to make sure our Files panel is ready to go in Dreamweaver. And you can see that I have my Photoshop stuff in it. And there's this file, the index file that we're working on. And there's the 2 folders we were working on in the last tutorial. I've got my layout with all of my images in it, and then I've got that header background image we're going to use in a minute. So I'm going to collapse this down here so I get myself some more room. You'll notice that in split view here, I've got my design on the right hand side, I've got my code here on the left. We're going to do most of it in code, obviously, and I've got my CSS inside this document, so I don't have an external style sheet for this tutorial. So the CSS is in with the HTML. If you're a beginning Dreamweaver user, then this may be easier for you to have the CSS and the HTML together in one document. More advanced users will probably have an external style sheet where your CSS is managed externally. All right, so we have a few items. I've got rid of a bunch of stuff in my Dreamweaver file. When I made this file, I just used a basic document. I went to File, New, and I used this blank page HTML 2-column fixed. But then I went in and got rid of everything I didn't need. So you can see that my CSS just has the body, container, header, and footer. And then down below, you can see my HTML just has, of course, my body. You have to have that. It has the div class of container, the header, and the footer. And that's it. So let's get started with the header. The first thing we want to do is we want to get our little header slice that we did in Photoshop. We want to bring that in here. We got to do that in the background of the header. So I'm going to go up here where I've got a background, where I've already got a header existing. And I actually don't need a background color in here, but I'm going to give myself some room. We just want to have background dash image. So you're going to see background dash image colon. I'm going to browse for that image, and it should be in my images folder. There it is. And semicolon will end that. Now I don't see it over here because I don't have a height and width. Well, or at least I don't have a height. Well, let me put that in. So I'm going to hit return, height. I knew that was 93 pixels, semicolon, and now we see it. And remember that little teeny slice that we made back in Photoshop, and that translated into this long bar here because it's using the repeat function. So in other words, by default, if you put an image in the background of a div, it's going to repeat no matter what, X and Y. To prove that it's also going Y, I could add on 193, and you can see it's repeating in both directions. So I just want it 93. That's the height of my Photoshop image, and so then I don't have anything to worry about here. Now it's going this whole width here because the header, even though I haven't defined a width, is inside the container, and the container is 960 pixels wide, so the header is by default that wide. I could put a width on the header as well, and let me just show you if I made it smaller here. You can see that my container, which is this white box, is going this whole width of 960, and my header now is only going the 760. Well, I don't want that. I just wanted to show you that I could define a width. If I don't define a width, the header width will automatically take on the characteristic of its parent container. And in this case, it is the container. All right, so we've got that header in there. Now let's get that logo going. So we need to make a class for the logo, and we need to make an object for it. So we need to make the actual object down in HTML. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to say div space class equals, and I'm going to hand type this because I just think this is a lot easier to hand type it than to use the insert div box right here. In the past I've used that before, but I just think it's a lot easier just to teach you how to hand type this. So div class equals logo, and I want to have the closing tag. That's the opening and closing tag now. And this logo is going to go in the foreground of this div box. So I'm going to put my cursor right in between the opening of the tag and the closing of the tag, and we're going to want to go to File, Insert Image, and go find in my Web Layout Assets logo. There it is, and there we go. So now we can see the logos in there. Now it's not positioned in the right spot. That's okay. It will be when we make the class for it. So I'm going to go up here in my CSS. Doesn't matter where I put it in the CSS. I'm going to put it below the header selector. So I'm going to type in dot. As soon as I type in that period, which tells Dreamweaver that this is a class, you can see that my two classes that are already happening in my site are already there. Look at that. There's my logo, so I don't even have to type it. And then I put my curly brackets, which are my declaration bracket, and inside that I can define a height and width. Well, my height and width is 266 wide by 47 high, so I can define the div box with its width first. So 266 px semicolon, and then I can define my height, and what's that height on there? I already forgot. 47 high. So I want to define those because I'm going to have other things around this logo, so I want to make sure my box is defined with its height and width. So there we go. That's a defined height and width there for the logo. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to move it, of course, off of the top and the left edge. So that will be margin. So I'm going to do a margin left, and I don't know, I'll try out 50px, and you'll see as soon as I do that, it's going to move it over to the right. And then I want to bring this down from the top. Now something's weird is going to happen here because, and I'll explain this in a second. So margin, let's go top, and I'll say, let's say 20 pixels, semicolon. Now what it's doing is, it is kind of messing up a little bit. It should be moving my logo, which is inside the header, down a little bit, but it's moving my whole container down. And that's kind of strange, and it's kind of freaking out here a little bit. The way to fix that is to go up in the containing box that's holding it and give it a padding of just 1 pixel. So I'm going to say padding and 1px, and that will then fix that problem. So in other words, my logo here, I tried to margin top, but for whatever reason, Dreamweaver doesn't like the containing box that's holding it. It doesn't like it to not have a padding in it of at least 1 pixel to be able to do this. So trust me on that. It just makes the whole thing work better. Now I can just do padding top, by the way. I don't need to do padding all the way around. I can just do padding top. All right. You can also put that in your container as well. Just put a padding of 1 all the way around. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to get the 4 link buttons in here. So I'm going to name those. I'm going to create them down in here. They're going to still be nested inside the header. So I'm going to go to all code view here for a second. They're still going to be nested inside the header. And I'm going to make those div space class equals and curly bracket, or excuse me, a quotation mark. And I want to give this a name. So the first one's going to be called maybe home. It'll keep it easy. Close that opening tag and give myself some space here, and I'm just going to copy and paste this first class that I made, the selector, and create a few other ones for the other buttons. So once I have these copied, I can just go ahead and rename these according to what images that are going to go in there. So this is going to be the portfolio, this one's going to be the about, and then this one's going to be the contact right here. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to insert those images into those divs. So I'm going to say insert image to each one of them, and the first one is going to be the home.jpg. There we go. Second one is going to be the portfolio, so I'll just go up to insert image and pick portfolio. Then the third one's going to be the about, so insert image and about, and then the last one will be contact. So once I've got those images in there, then I can go define their CSS, give them the height and width. So my height and width of all of these, the height's going to be the same, 76. My width on my home button is 88. So let's make these right now. So I'm going to make this class of home. You can see that as soon as I type the period in there, it's going to give me the selector, and then my width for this one in particular is going to be 88 px semicolon, and then my height will be 76 px, semicolon. Now, I want to make my other ones and then copy and paste that. So I'm going to say period and get the portfolio and get those brackets, and I can copy and paste this in there, and I'll just change the width of my portfolio, which if I look down at the bottom here, I can see that it's 120. Or I usually like to write these down beforehand on a, in a notebook when I'm working on a site, so I have them all there. Okay, and then I'm going to go here, I'm going to make the about, give myself my declaration brackets, give myself some space, and then the about is going to have the same thing, and that about size is 116, so I'll create that, and then let me give it my last one, period, and then I'll get to contact. As soon as I put that in there, then I can copy and paste this and put my contact, which I think its width is also 116. All right, so now when I go over here and go to split view, you can see I've got all of my images there ready to go. And you'll see that they're lining up on the left-hand side and down. Well, I want them up inside the header. So to put them in there, I have to do a float, and I have to start that float with the logo. So I'm going to go here to the logo, and I'm going to go to float and pick left. So it's going to float off the left-hand side. So these will all get horizontal. And then I'll take this and put the float in here. And if you don't know what floats are, you can refer to one of my earlier tutorials. And you can see as I'm doing this, they're all kind of going in line here and doing what they're supposed to do. There now, of course, I want to margin them. So I'm going to margin the home button. I don't want it sitting right next to the logo over there. So I want to say margin dash left. And then maybe say 50px, semicolon. And that moves that over. And then I want to margin these all down from the top. So I'm going to say margin dash top, colon, and maybe say 10px. And there we go. And then go here, paste that, and go to my about, paste that, and then go to the about and paste that. And so now they'll all have the margin top. And they look like they should have a little space between them a little bit. So the margin left 50 pixels is a little too big. So if I put that on there, that's going to be bad, but I'm going to change it in a second. But I'll go margin left on all of these as well. I'll go margin left on all of these as well. So once I do that, you can see that they're spread out way too far here. But I'm going to go just change each one of them to maybe say 10 pixels each, and that might be a better width. I can always go back at any time and change these, which is really, really good. All right, so those are looking good. Now I can do the rollover portion of these. If I click on this, I can see how if I click each one of these, I have to be in design view and not live view. If I click on one of these, I can go to the behaviors panel. So I go to window, behaviors. We've done this in another tutorial, so I'm going to do this quickly just to the one. I'm clicked on my home, which is in the foreground of the div box. You can't do this to an image that's in the background. So this is in the foreground of the div box. I'm going to click here to the plus sign and go to swap image and go browse for the home over. So I'll go here and go to open and click OK. And now it's got that swap image, so I'll get that hover. So if I go back to live view, you can see that when I hover over this, it does create that hover effect that we want, which is very cool. All right, so the next step now is we're going to create the next level down, the box that comes below this header. So I want to do that right over here. I'm going to go back to code view, and I'm going to go here to my header, give myself some space, and I'm going to create a div class where this box is going to exist. So I'm going to say div space class equals quotation marks. Give that a name. So I'm going to name this feature box, or let's say large box. Yeah, that would be very good. That's what I named. So I'm going to say large box and close that opening tag and then give it a closing tag. Now the large box, I'm not going to put the background image in here. I have to put that in the CSS. So let's make the CSS for the large box. So I'm going to go here, create that, create the CSS selector. I've got the declaration brackets, and I'm going to give this a height and width, of course, in a second, but let me get the background image in there. So background dash image colon. I'm going to go browse for that, and it's in my web layout assets, and there's large box, that's the gray box there. There we go, and semicolon to end that. Now if I go to split view, I won't see it yet because I haven't defined a height and width for this large box. So the width for this is 950 px. Like I said, I usually write these down. If you don't write it down, you can always go to your folder and check inside the folder in the assets, and then you should see it in there. So here I am, I've got the large box, so it's 950 by 267. So now I'm going to go back in here and give it a height of 267 px. Okay, so now you can see that the box is in there and it's doing right what it's supposed to do. It's going right below this header. Now what I want to do is I want to margin this down a little bit so that it is not right below the header. So I'm going to give it a margin dash top and colon and maybe 25 px. And I want to be fairly consistent with my spacing. You'll also see that it's not right in the center of my website box here. So I'm going to move that over to the center of this box. And if I do a margin dash left colon and then auto with a semicolon, and then I do the same thing with the right hand side, so margin dash left and then margin dash right. So I'm going to just copy and paste that and do a right on here. You'll see that it'll put it right in. You can see it's the same exact width on either side, so I don't have to define a pixel position for the margin on this large box. I can do the auto and it'll center it in the container. All right, you can't tell right now, but this box is coming after the header, and the last thing that was in the header was contact, and that's floating left. And the large box actually needs to be cleared. So this is an important thing. Anytime you do a float, the very next box that comes after it needs to be cleared, and this will create some inconsistencies in your design if you don't do this. So you definitely want to do a clear, and then you can say both on here, and it'll clear the float that came before it so that this box will operate independently of this float right here, and it won't try to follow this one in line. If you don't do this clear on here of both, then what could happen is your design could start looking a little wonky when you get it on a browser. So this helps get it so that it resituates it back in the flow of the document. Remember, the floats that are happening here are actually taking the design outside the flow of the document, the natural flow of the CSS, and this clear puts the next object back into the regular flow. Now we need to get our two elements inside this gray box. We're going to have text over here, and we're going to have an image over here. So let's make those. So I'm going to go to Code View, and I'm going to go down into our large box, and we're going to nest this inside the large box. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of room here, and what I want to do, what I want to do here is I want to create two divs that are going to go inside this. So let's say div space class equals, I'm giving this a name, and it doesn't matter what I name this. I could name this unicorn. This is a name I come up with, but it should be something that's going to let you know what you're doing. So maybe I say inside the large box, I'll say small box. I don't know. It's something just so that I know what's going on here. And maybe I say small box 1 because I'm going to have two of them. So small box 1 and then colon and then close that. And then I'm going to do the same thing and create a small box 2. So I'll just copy this, Command C, and then go down here and paste it. Call this small box 2. And what I'll do now is make the CSS for these. So I'm going to go up to the CSS and put in the period, and you'll see small box will come in and give it its declaration brackets, hit return, and then go to small box 2, declaration brackets. Got to have both of those. And now I can define their height and width. Now small box 1, I'm going to say, well, the height can't be anywhere over 267 because the large box 267. So I know my height is going to be a little bit smaller than that. So I'll say 250. especially if I put padding inside this box, let's say. And then the width on this, well, I'll just make it 250 as well, because my width is 950 total. So I'll make this 250 px. Okay, so that's the small box. And I'm going to have text in there. I'll do that down in the HTML. And then in here, for the small box 2, this is where the picture is going to go. So I'm going to do the height, same thing. I'll probably do the height on this, 267, so it fits right in. And then the width on this is going to be considerably, bigger. Width. And then the width on this, I'll just make 400 px, and there I go. And now I can put the images in these boxes. So I'm going to put the image in this box. I can either do the foreground of the box or the background. I'll do it in the foreground. Insert image, and let's see, I called this large pic, so that's going to go in there. So its width was 486, so I definitely have to go up here and make small box 1, make it 486. So there I go, and its height was probably okay, so it's 247. So that's fine. I can go 247 and change that. And if I go to split view, now you can see what's going on here is I have these two boxes. Now what needs to happen? They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're starting at the top left and cascading down. Well, I need them to be side by side, so both these boxes have to float left. So let me go back to code view, and let's go into our code here, and we'll say float, float, and then left, and semicolon, and then I'm going to go here and copy this, Command C, and paste it on the other one, so that it's in the same thing. And now when we go to split view, we'll see those boxes side by side. Now they're not exactly where I want them to be, so now I'm going to use the margins here. So let's look at the margin here. I'm going to say, start with the small box 1 and move the margin for that one, margin dash left, and I'll give that, let's say, 50 px semicolon, and it's going to push the other box over. And then for this, so that's my text box, and then for this one I'll do margin dash left, Command C, go here, and push that one over, maybe even, now this margin left is coming after this one. So here's small box 1, and here's the big box, and so this margin is coming after this one. So I'll leave that there for now. I want to push this down a little bit so it's inside the shadow. So I'm going to say margin top on small box 2 as well. So watch what I do here. I'm going to say margin dash top colon, and then I'm going to say maybe 10 px semicolon, and you'll see it pushes down, so now it's inside the shadow of that box. So that's great. Now, of course, in the text in small box 1, if I go over here, let me just kind of pull this a little bit bigger, small box 1, I would have actually p tags and h tags and whatever. So I would put text inside here. So maybe I do a p tag, right, where I would then put some text in there. There is some text, and then close that tag. And then that text is going to go in there. And of course I could detail this out and do a lot more things with that. All right. So looking pretty good. I'm going to go back to design view here now and click on this. So that's kind of looking where we want. You can see our footer is kind of right underneath this box here. So that'll get pushed down when we put our next two boxes in. So let's get started on those. So we're almost in the home stretch here. We got small box 1, small box 2. Now what I want to do actually is I want to look at this because I want to create a box down here that's going to hold 2 more boxes. So I'm going to create a kind of a wrapper box that's going to hold 2 other div boxes inside that, and actually it's going to hold some more boxes within that. So if I go to split view, you'll kind of see this kind of happening. I'm going to create below small box 2 right here, and below large box actually, I'm going to go, because small box 1 and 2 are inside large box, I'm going to call this a wrapper. So I'm going to say maybe wrapper 1, so I'm going to say div space class equals quotation marks, and I'll say wrapper. I'll just title it wrapper, and then close that. And inside that wrapper, which is going to go below this, and it will have a height and width. There's going to be some divs inside that. So let me make those real quick, and you'll see how those work, and then I can put some stuff in it. So I'm going to have a left one and a right one. These will both be floated. So here's the left, and I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to make a right one. And these are both going to be nested inside wrapper. And it'll just make my life a lot easier because they're going to be floated. So there we go. So I got a left and right. So now I need to make those 3 CSS styles. So I'm going to go up here right above the footer and period. And then you can see I've got the wrapper. Put that in there and give it its width will take on the width of the container, so I don't need that. But maybe I give it a height here. Actually, the height doesn't even really matter either, but I'm going to give it a height. And let's say, I don't know, 500 px, and there we go. And then I need to make the other 2. These are the important ones, so these are going to be the left and the right. So inside the wrapper are left and right, so I've got that one. And then this one's going to be the right. And now we go here. All right, so now I can give them their widths. Of course, the width is not going to be bigger than 960 total because my container is 960. So the width of these 2, left and right, can't equal more than that. So I'm going to say width, and I'll just say for right now, 430, because I want some space in between those. And then I'm going to do a float left because, of course, they got to be side by side. So I'm going to do the float left, and I'll copy that with the right box as well. And then I'll be able to put the stuff in those 2 boxes. So there they are. You can kind of see them over here in design view. You can see the left and right box. You can't see the wrapper, but they're both inside it. You can see right down at the bottom of Dreamweaver, when I click inside any one of these, the containing box for that is wrapper, and it's yellow around the whole thing. So now let me put the items inside the left and right. Inside each of, well, inside the left, we're going to have 2 divs inside that one. We're going to have the div that has the little text box. So div equals, I'm going to call this heading 1. Just, doesn't matter what I name it, just so I know what it is. And let me close that. And then I'm going to have heading 2 inside the right box. So I'm going to give myself some space here and do a heading 2 inside the right box. And I'm going to put those in there. I'm going to insert those images in there. They can go in either the foreground or the background of this box. I'm going to put on the foreground, insert image, and I'm going to go pick. And so this will be the current news. I click that one. That's on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side in the heading div, I'm going to insert the featured box. So image, I'm going to say featured work. There we go. And now I've got those 2 images in there. Perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to create the boxes that go, the box that goes below current news, and then the 2 boxes that go below featured work. So in the left-hand side, I'm going to put another div inside my left class, and this is going to be content in here. So div space class equals, and this is going to have some content in it. So I'll say content. I'm just going to say text in here, text 1. You might have lots of text, so you don't want to limit yourself there. And that's going to close that, and that's where there'll be some text in here. So I would put a whole bunch of lorem ipsum in this box. So to put the lorem ipsum in there, I'd go and copy and paste that from the website Lipsum. Okay, so I've got that copied in there. I just copied and pasted that. And so if I go to design view, you can see that I've got some text in there. And now I want to get the images on the other side in the right box. So I've already got this heading class nested inside right box. Now I want to have 2 more in there, or 1 more. So I'm going to go div space class equals and call this feature 1. And then I want to do a feature 2. So I'll have Command C, hit return, and then feature 2. Now I want to make the CSS for these items here. So I go up here and I'm going to create the CSS for those items. So I've got the first one that I want to do is I want to do text. Well, I could always have the text one. I've got the feature. Okay, I need heading 1. So we've got that. And then I want to do heading 2. I'll give me my CSS for those. And then I want to do, and then I want to do the feature 1 and feature 2. And there we go. So now I've got all the elements I need, and of course I would go back and do a text one as well. So those are all the elements I need. I got feature 2, feature 1, heading 2. Do I have the heading 2 up there? Yep, heading 2 right there. And so that's going to cover all the things that I need to finish this. Now, when I'm putting those things in there, I've got the, let me put the 2 big images inside. So I've got feature 1. I'm going to go to insert, image, and there we go. And then I'm going to go in here and put in featured work. Where is it? It is box 1. And there we go. And then I just do the same thing and image, put in another box. I'm just going to use the same one. I use box 2, or I could use box 2. There we go. And now I've got, if I go to design view, now I've got those 2 images in there. So it's starting to look good. Now, of course, in my Photoshop design that I started with, I had that blue background. That was the color of this header. It was kind of that header color, so I'll put that in the container and maybe even the body background. So before I get going any further, I'm actually going to take the container color out and put that baby blue color in the background of the body. So I'm going to go up here all the way up to container in my. So I can go up to my container and delete out the white background color, and then it'll make the container transparent. And I can go here and I can add my color in there. That was my color for my Photoshop design. And now when I go to design view, I've got that background color. It's perfect. So now I want to move these around just like we did up here with the margins. It'd be the same thing that you would do. You would do margin top and margin left to move these objects around, but you can see that we've got pretty much the layout that we had there in Photoshop. So you just want to go into your code, and I think you get this now at this point. You want to go into your code and you want to move this stuff around and give it its margins. So you're going to want to go into the CSS and change the heading. So I want to say margin dash top. So dash top. By putting it inside this wrapper, the float is kind of, I didn't really, everything worked out pretty good by putting inside the wrapper. Everything's kind of in the right spot. So I'm going to do margin dash top and then say maybe 25 pixels. That was pretty consistent on this. And you can see it'll move that down into place. And then I'll go to the feature. I'll do the heading 2 and put that same thing. So then I'll go to heading 2 and put that same thing there, and it'll push all those down. Then what I want to do, of course, is move my feature images down. So I'll go to feature 1 and I'll do feature 1 and feature 2. Give myself margin tops between those two, and just give myself even spacing throughout the site. So now that's looking pretty good, and I can move these things around and get even more spacing going on so that it's perfect. You'll just use your margin and you'll use your padding maybe in the text, like over here. So that's how we do the layout. Going from Photoshop into Dreamweaver, you can see how you make all the elements in Photoshop, and it's almost like taking a puzzle and making it, and then making the puzzle and then taking it apart, putting it back together again in Dreamweaver by using the divs. So once again, thank you for watching another Curtis Stage tutorial, and we'll see you next time.